George calling Desiree. Hey everyone, it's George Leith. We're getting ready for this week's webinar on the political advertising opportunity that's coming our way. And we're going to get started in a few moments. We're just waiting for a few more people to join. So stand by and we'll be with you in a few seconds. Hello, everyone. It's 4 o'clock Eastern. We're just moments away from kicking off our webinar. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. My name is George Leith. We'll be with you here in a few seconds. Well, good afternoon, everyone. George Leith joining you on this week's weekly webinar. We were just, and thanks to Brock Andoni, our producer, for putting together all the content and doing all the research today. We were just trying to figure out when the last time I had done a weekly webinar is. It's definitely a number of years back. But good to be joining you today. The conduit that I've been using is, of course, Conquer Local Podcast. So I just want to, give a shameless plug. If you haven't subscribed or you haven't listened, go to Google Play or to iTunes or SoundCloud and look up the Conquer Local Podcast. We'd love to have you as one of our listeners. And I have a special guest joining me on the line, Desiree Kupietz, our VP of Partner Development. Good afternoon, Desiree, and thanks for joining us on the weekly webinar.
Good afternoon, George, and thanks for having me.
So our topic is political advertising, and we're coming into what some people would call harvest. And, Desiree, in a former life where we first met, you were at the McClatchy Company working in a number of their markets. And I think a little birdie told me that you had a lot of success in selling political advertising. Would you like to comment a little bit about your experience around, when this 4-year cycle happens, or, I guess we could look at it as a 2-year cycle because you have the midterms and then you have the presidential elections and the Senate, elections. Could you fill us in a little bit about, the opportunity that exists around political advertising in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, George. And, when you talk about opportunity, talk about massive opportunity, political advertising, there is so much money to be won there. And the most important thing I've learned in regards to this type of advertising is you have to be in front. You have to make sure that these political candidates, the campaign managers, they know of you. They look at you as a media provider that they can leverage to drive success with these campaigns. So later on, I'll talk a little bit about the strategy behind that. But where we found the most success was ensuring that, one, we were present, we were out there, we were seeking the political candidates actively. So we took a proactive approach in doing so, and actually bringing political candidates together in one room and helping to educate them and understand the digital landscape and the media space, what's important, how to execute a campaign, how to drive success with it, and also be available to answer questions. So I think there's a couple different tactics that need to be taken to ensure success in this space. And just know that everybody's going after these dollars because there are so many out there to be won. It's really important we as media providers get ahead of it as much as possible to drive the success.
Well, you know, I look back over the years, and one of the things that kind of stimulated our thoughts around having this webinar is we're in the middle of a federal election in Canada. And, you know, I remember back to my days in the media business, it was like a bonanza. For about 60 days, you had a whole bunch of money that was being spent. And interestingly enough, if it's not the incumbent candidate, like the person that's seeking a re-election, you're really dealing with a bunch of rookies that have to be educated, from the candidate themselves on down through their campaign managers. And have you found that, Desiree, that a lot of education needs to be done?
Absolutely. And even with the campaign managers, right? So they may go into any campaign thinking, okay, I know what we're going to do. We want to run TV ads, but sometimes it stops right there. They don't know what else in terms of tactics and digital opportunities that they could be leveraging to ensure the success of even those TV campaigns. And here's the other thing. TV inventory does run out. So in those cases, what we found is sometimes they're scrambling at the last minute to spend those dollars on other forms of advertising. So if we do a good enough job at the forefront and we educate them and ensure that they have a sophisticated and strong marketing strategy, you're more likely to win those dollars. And the other piece of it too is, if you're a media provider and you're not a TV media provider, let's say, that's okay. There is plenty of money that will be spent in other media, in other mediums. It could be radio, it could be newspaper, it could be magazines. Social marketing is huge right now. Video content and just producing actually written content, whether it's blogs or articles. So there's so many forms that that campaign managers and candidates alone just aren't aware of, and they don't understand the impact of those. So it's up to us to educate them to help drive the success.
So I want to walk through, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the numbers, and Desiree, we're going to lean on you to give us some more stories of success that you had in this space. And then we're going to walk through what some of the solutions from the marketplace might look like being deployed against these campaigns. Of course, we've got the Canadian federal election coming up on the 21st of October. To Desiree's point, if they are spending a bunch of money on television advertising and inventory is at a minimum, because there is a finite amount of inventory there, they may be open to looking at other spends, and they have those budgets. So keep that in mind. The other piece is, of course, the US, we're moving up towards the November 3rd, 2020 election. So the dollars, there's projecting about a $10 billion projected spend in the US, 20% of that being on digital. And keep in mind, everybody's interested in getting those Gen Z and young millennial voters. There's a 92% intent number around the people that are intending to vote. And 70% of respondents say that they intend to pay attention to political advertising. So they're still trying to craft how they sit on this. Now, of course, I spent a lot of time in the US. I got a lot of friends in the US, but I'm definitely not an American. So Desiree, I'm going to lean on you. It's not just, you know, a candidate for the House of Representatives or for the Senate or even at the presidential level. There also are these super PACs and PACs. Can we talk a little bit about the opportunity around those groups?
Yeah, definitely, George. And, you know, just to kind of emphasize this, while we see that in some states that there's going to be a plethora of money spent here, it's important to know that there's a lot of money at the local level too. And it's really important to make sure that you as a media consultant or a media company have a presence. And the reason why I say that is because the space can be highly competitive, and people are looking at, and when I say people, I'm referring to political candidates and campaign managers. They're looking for someone that can help them spend those dollars effectively and efficiently. So really, really important to drive home on that local piece. And especially if you don't reside in one of the states, in regards to those that are going to get the bulk of some of that money that George was talking about earlier. I think you said it was about 10 billion, George. Mm-hmm. And so really important to have a local emphasis, but not only that, you can also focus outside of your local market. So if you have the ability and capacity to target and start marketing outside of there to win some of those dollars over, because you have the digital tactics that can still drive success, regardless if you live within that state or not, I would definitely and highly recommend that you do it.
Well, and what I've found is that a lot of these, the campaign committees and things like that, they're relying on people that they have past relationships with, because it's, in a lot of cases, it's not their full-time job. It's something that they volunteered to be a part of, and it's a cause they believe in or a candidate they believe in. And I'm glad that you brought up the point that there also are these local elections that are happening in various jurisdictions. And then there also are these initiatives that are being voted on at the same time. And it seems like all of them have campaign funds available to promote their agenda. And we're going to get into some of the tactics in a few minutes. But, you know, this is an example of the PAC and Super PAC. And, you know, in your former life, I remember hearing this story about a rep that went and called on one of these groups, and they were actually looking to do the marketing all across the US. And because they were selling digital, and there's no jurisdiction, you just say, yeah, we'll run the digital wherever you want. You have the ability to do that. Your colleague was able to win like a $400,000 budget, if I remember correctly. So I don't think we need to name names, but you know, that's a true story, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, with something like that, George, and that particular success, that comes down to, again, being there, right? And also being able to execute and implement something very quickly, and ensuring that you explain that you have the ability to do so and how you're going to do it. The more transparent you are, and the better you articulate the tactics to reach the right audience, the more likely you are to engage with that campaign manager or candidate and win those dollars. And what you're doing is also eliminating all of the heartache and pain that they have to go through by having to go through multiple media providers, right? To actually drive a successful campaign. Because when you start, what happens is when there's multiple campaign providers, let's say, the messages can be mixed, the strategy is not the same, therefore it can affect the outcome and the success of that campaign. So I think in general, the campaign managers and candidates would prefer to work with one provider.
No, and it's an exciting time that we live in, because I remember I would be talking to a campaign manager in my early days in the radio business, and they'd be like, yeah, we want to make sure we run some ads over here in this market. And I knew that our station didn't reach that audience, so I'd have to pass the lead on to some other radio station guy, and they got that budget. Whereas in this case, when you have a digital solution that is not bound by that geography, where you can run it anywhere, you could say, yeah, I can get you that audience in that other market. So, you know, it's pretty cool. Let's look at some of the tactics, and Desiree, feel free to weigh in on this. But, you know, the one thing for our partners that are listening, we have that Sales and Success Center where you can start to add your items to the pipeline and to track them. I think this is important because you want to make sure that you're putting the contact information in, and maybe running some sort of a marketing automation campaign to do some air cover. And I'm a big believer in air cover. so if we have those contacts, we can send them some information, maybe not buy my stuff. You know, I want to reiterate that it's got to be something that has some value. And our marketing team is working on some white labeled messaging that we'll make available in the resource center that you could utilize in some of these campaigns. I think that you want to be educating, but to Desiree's point, I think you also want to be a little bit aggressive because it is a short window, and it's basically a race to get there first with the best message, and that's who's going to win that business. Have you saw that, Desiree, in your travels?
Yeah, definitely, George. And you make a great point in regards to the outreach, whether, you know, you're using marketing automation through email, via text message, whatever the approach is that you're using. It's really important to know that you can do this. You can gather the contacts that you need to ensure that you're marketing to the right person. Most of this information is readily available to you online. It's a simple Google search, but what we've provided here are, Secretary of State websites that you can go to gather the actual candidates that would be running, and the County Board of Elections too. If you go there, you can look under elections and you can see who's running. Now, the other thing is too, a lot of these sites will tell you who the campaign managers are, and they'll give you that contact information. And I think a lot of people tend to forget that this information is available at your fingertips. And I think, you know, when I look back in previous years, there definitely would be campaign managers and also candidates that would reach out directly to certain media companies. And I feel like that's a great win. That's awesome if you're able to get that. But now that the space has become so competitive, and a lot of the times these campaign managers and candidates don't necessarily know everything that you do. So it's important that you take the proactive approach to educate them on the solutions that you provide, and not just that, because you don't want to just be selling to them. But what you want to do is educate them on how you're able to address a specific audience, how you can hyper target that audience, and some of the execution and implementation tactics that you will use to ensure the success of a campaign. So George, to your point, education is so important in any of these campaigns and outreach.
Well, and another thing that I know you're super passionate about in the work that you do in developing and working with our various partners all over North America, and we're happy to get a few minutes of your time because I know you've been quite busy working with partners, is that setting the expectation of what success looks like early. And so, you know, we brought that up. What determines success in one of these campaigns? Like, I don't necessarily think that it's a visit to the campaign office. So can we talk a little bit, Desiree, about the way that you set expectations when you were selling these campaigns?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when we think about expectations, very, very different from a smaller, medium, even large business, especially if they're a brick and mortar, right? I have here, you know, what determines success? Is it click-through rates? Is it impressions? You know, at the end of the day, for these guys, it's votes. And when we think about that, that's kind of hard to track, right? Until the actual voting happens, and it's after the fact. So how do we drive success, prove ROI, and progression of these campaigns before the votes come in? Well, there's a number of ways that you can do it. I highly recommend first setting those expectations up front, right? Meaning, talk about the metrics that you can leverage to see how well the campaign is performing. Now you're probably thinking, well, what defines good performance? Well, that could depend on the candidate or the campaign manager on what the expected outcome of the actual campaign is above and beyond votes. It could be visits to a landing page. However, the one thing that we need to remember is, you know, the conversion traffic that's going to come from, let's say, a digital advertising campaign to an actual landing page generally is fairly low for political campaigns. So it should be truly about the audience that they're reaching, the actual reach itself. And not only that, ensuring that the campaign is leveraging a cross-device targeting tactic. And you can be very transparent about all of these with all of these tactics. and all of the metrics you are able to report on. But it's very important to know that the messaging in these campaigns is going to be the number one driver. And what I mean by that is, if they're looking for an action, the messaging has to ask for that action. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And the messaging has to be very clear and concise as well. And so all of these things really need to be talked about at the time of setting those expectations and building out a solid campaign. And this can be done with the campaign manager directly, or maybe in some cases include the candidate, which I would ask for. So again, just very important to understand the actual campaign itself, and also be very transparent and set those expectations up front.
So when we're executing those campaigns, you have some tips for that as well.
Yes, so the execution part, this is very important because we know that in the political space, most of these advertising campaigns are paid up front. Generally, media companies are not billing a candidate for a campaign that's already run. And these dollars sometimes come in very last minute, and they have very short windows to actually run the campaigns. So a couple of things. I just talked about the messaging, and that also coincides with content, especially if you're doing any social marketing for these campaigns. Make sure that content and that imagery is relevant to the target audience. In some cases, these campaigns can have multiple audiences. So that means the creative assets have to address those audiences individually. So be comfortable with having that discussion with whomever it is you're dealing with for a particular campaign. And this is where you really step up and you become a consultant versus just taking an order because the money's there. So really important to cover those bases with any political campaign.
Well, you brought up a really good point that I want to make sure that our listeners don't fall into the trap. Mm-hmm. Money up front. Do not offer credit to a political campaign, because when they lose, they shut the thing down, and right? It's happened. I've had it bite me in the ass at some point in time in my career, and they expect to pay up front. So by you walking in and saying, here's the campaign, it's 40 grand and I need the money, everybody else is doing the same thing that's been doing this for a while. So please, please, please do not offer credit to a political campaign. It will come back to burn you.
Absolutely. Yes. Collect those funds up front before anything gets executed. And, the other piece to remember is, as George said, things can change very quickly in a matter of a day with these campaigns. So when you have that commitment and you have the money, make sure that campaign deploys in a very timely manner, because sometimes those windows are very short. The other thing to remember is too, inventory. If you're selling a specific set of inventory, make sure you're able to deliver and fulfill on that, because you've collected those funds. And if you can't, allocate those funds to other tactics you may have in place for that campaign. So it's very important that there's a high level of detail with these campaigns in terms of monitoring and watching how they're delivering to ensure that you're spending that full budget that you've already collected.
And one of the things I'd like to talk about on our end when it comes to campaign execution inside our building, if you're using the marketing services advertising team to deliver these solutions, we have trained our team to make sure that they're monitoring the performance of those campaigns to spend the budget that has been delivered. But to Desiree's point, candidate might drop out of the election Friday. And if we haven't spent all the budget, you might have to give it back, and we don't want that. So it's a matter of making sure that, yes, the inventory is there, making sure, yes, that the funds are being used, making sure that we've, dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. It's not like you turn it on and 6 months later it's still running. They're very small windows, and things change. The other thing I'd like to tell you is, as a salesperson, always be selling on this. You want to keep phoning back, because they might have just got a donation of some more money that they want to pour towards a campaign, and you want to make sure that you're there to help them do that. So, it's a very fluid type of thing. It's not like we get it put in place and we run it for 90 days and we're done. You might be leaving money on the table where they have further donations of funds that, are towards that goal. So I want to move on to some of the solutions now, because I think everybody looks at this and says, well, okay, I'm going to sell a bunch of advertising. So advertising is definitely the big opportunity here. And LocalAds is the program where we are able to actually geofence and target audiences based upon a physical location. And Desiree, why do you like this blueprinting and the location marketing for putting messages in front of people? Where do you think the best application is?
Yeah, I love this, because when we talk about hyper-focused audiences, this is a great way to get granular and make sure you're targeting the right audience. So you can target an audience this way based on their activities. And not only that, remember when I said cross-device targeting? This is something that allows you to do so. So maybe you capture them based on where they are with their cell phone, but then they go home, they get on their laptop or their iPad, whichever it may be. You have the ability to target across any device that person is on once you capture them. And the reason why that's so important is because you want to capture them in all instances, no matter what they're doing. And the messaging has to be repetitive. I think we can all agree that when it's political campaign season, we get inundated with TV commercials, right? And some of them play back to back to back. Well, there's a reason for that. It's a short window and the message has to get across. So this is another way to extend that reach and extend the messaging just beyond TV.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't work at a TV station, and I'm looking through the people that are attending the webinar today, and I don't see a lot of people that work at a TV station, but that shouldn't stand between us and offering a video solution. And you know, I'm thinking of YouTube, but there also is a new acronym, Desiree, that we should introduce to our audience.
Are you asked? Sorry, George.
Well, I was leading you towards OTT and over the top, because we can access that OTT inventory. And the thing about connected TVs is that inventory is being placed by a robot into a programmatic algorithm. Mm-hmm. And we actually can offer video even though we don't work at a TV station. So it's an interesting place to be, especially on these political campaigns, because they want that TV. They see it as the best form of advertising. And now with LocalAds and the inventory that we're able to access through OTT, we can provide that to them. Plus we can do pre-roll on YouTube and things like that.
Yes, and George, to your point, OTT is expected to be the second most purchased tactic in 2020 when it comes to political campaigns.
Well, and you know, let's dig into that for a minute for our audience. It actually makes a lot of sense. Cord cutters. So they got rid of the cable. They still are getting their internet streaming from somewhere, and they're using the apps on a Roku or an Apple TV or whatever it might be. And I caught myself this week. I just subscribed to another bloody thing, cost me $2.99 a month. I'm probably never going to worry about that again. I'll add that to the 15 other things that it's probably the same price as my cable was costing me before I cut it. But the point is on those apps, whatever it is that you've downloaded, the inventory is there programmatically. And also we've got Sling TV, which exists, where Desiree is going to see a different ad based on her viewing preferences compared to what I'm going to see, or producer Brock. So there's just so much technology out there available. And the good news is we don't have to say, okay, go down there and buy it from the TV station. We could say, no, I can provide that for you as well. So I'm excited about that. Let's move on to talking about the campaign offices. So here's something that we've discovered over the past couple of elections, and that is we've got these candidates that are creating offices. And in order for them to rank in search, we probably should help them with their listings, right, Desiree?
Absolutely. And think about this too. Maybe someone wants to go in person and make a donation. I'm sure a candidate would love to receive that donation. And yes, people do still walk into places to donate or even pay their bills. I know it's shocking, but it does happen. So in this case, absolutely, George, they would need to ensure that they're findable. People can find them, especially when it comes to donating. So I think that's really where the value is for a candidate here. Otherwise, they may think of listings, why would I need a listing? Well, the response to that is, do you want to accept donations from people that want to bring it to you? Absolutely. So I definitely think that's the value prop here with listings.
Well, and then the other issue is when we search for that candidate, you know, the listing data in this and the fact that the campaign office is listed properly. And I'm thinking of not just name, address, phone number. I'm thinking of in the short and long description and that metadata that you can put in there where you put the candidate's name and you put his or her affiliations, and you can put some keyword targeting into those short and long descriptions. You're going to start to rank better when it comes to the organic search. So I love the fact that we're going to hook them on. You might get more donors walking in the door. I think for a campaign manager, that's pretty powerful stuff. The other piece is reputation management. So, you know, of our listeners that are on the webinar today, they all are very familiar with the reputation management solution. We kind of gamed this through the past couple of elections. So let me explain to you what I mean by that. You set up a reputation management account on the location for the campaign office or multiple locations of those offices. And then you go to the mentions tab. And inside the mentions tab, you are able to create keyword searches, which can have include and must include and must not include, where you can drill them down, and then you can start to provide that campaign with information about what's being said about maybe their competitors. Or, and you know, what happens with the mentions tab, when it goes out and it starts looking for those keywords, it goes back into the internet as far as it can find, and it might find a blog that was written against a competitor, or it might, wouldn't this be great if it found a photo? And I always think about Charlie Wilson's War. When I remember that show, Charlie Wilson, with Julia Roberts and you know who I'm talking about.
How far back are you going here, George?
I'm not going back that far, but Charlie Wilson's War. Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts, where Tom Hanks is like a congressman, and he's in this nefarious position in Las Vegas, and maybe that photo's online somewhere, and they're able to find it. Anyways, I'm going down the road here of by using the mentions tab inside reputation management, you can start to set up some search algorithms and provide data back to the campaign on what might be said about the competitors, or maybe what's even being said about their own candidates. So there's further information that you can find through keyword scraping. And boy, I'll tell you, it's good. There's some valuable things that you may be able to find in there. So reputation management also has a play in this space. And then social marketing. So Desiree, I'll let you talk about the opportunity using the social marketing app for campaigns.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much opportunity with social marketing, and I think many know that today. But here's the thing. It really comes down to ensuring, and this kind of dovetails on what you were saying about reputation management, George, which is knowing what's being said out there. When political season comes, there is so much stuff. We get inundated with articles and blogs and information. Think about it from a campaign manager, candidate standpoint. There's so much to filter through and sift through. Both of these tools offer them the ability to bring all of that information into one place and really monitor everything at one time, which is creating more efficiency so that they can spend their time continuing to market that campaign.
Well, and I'm thinking of one other use case for the social marketing tool. So first off, we're able to create posts, schedule them, and push them out online to various sources. Mm-hmm. But I also think there comes a day where somebody inside a campaign freaks out because of something that was posted by the campaign, or maybe they get called out by a competitor for something that they posted. And wouldn't it be nice if you could just go back to one place and see the archives of all of the official posts that had been put online by that campaign, regardless of where they were? So I think there's an audit function to this as well as an efficiency function of making sure that all of that posting is being done through one tool. So I'd like the listeners to think about that when you're thinking about your value proposition, putting it in front of the campaign office. There is the scalability and the efficiency, but also the ability to go back and say, here's a post that performed really well. Maybe we should keep posting in that vein. Or if we get audited by somebody asking us, did you post this 2 weeks ago? We can go back and say, no, this is actually what we posted. That thing you're hearing about, that was fake news. So that's the social marketing opportunity. So let's now just talk a little bit about an overarching view of the Vendasta suite for political marketing and advertising. Desiree, I'll let you touch on a few of these.
Yeah, one of the things I would really start with is, you're going to give them the keys to all of this, right? There's full transparency. They have the ability to implement and execute and even have a full marketing services team behind it, helping them with it. So when George mentioned earlier, our team is ready and prepared to execute any campaign in the political space, he truly means it. And it's important to know that you've got a team of experts that can help you and provide even one-on-one consultation and help to bring some of these opportunities across the line for you. The technology that's going to be available to you and the client is unbeatable, right? You have the ability to see and showcase everything that they would need to drive a successful campaign, whether it's through listings, reputation management, social or digital advertising. All of those solutions, of course, are branded as your own, right? So we are in the back end, but we are going to support you fully. We'll be here to ensure the implementation and execution goes smoothly, in addition to ensuring that the reporting is in line with the expectations of the candidate and the campaign manager. So this allows you to focus more on that one-on-one relationship and explaining the value of what they're getting ongoing throughout the campaign. Also with this is an opportunity to leverage, to drive success. That's one thing. But the other piece of this is the ability now to gather case studies too for future. So once you are able to start a campaign that has all of these tactics and strategies as a part of them, you now can start building a case study for future to help you acquire new customers, and maybe not just in the political space. But if you're looking at the political space, this does give you the opportunities to start marketing yourself and the success you've been able to drive for candidates.
Well, Desiree, we really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to come in here and help us with explaining the opportunity around political. This webinar is going to be hosted inside the platform. So for those of you that have attended, we're open for questions right now as well. If you'd like to ask some questions, please do so. We also have done some extensive training with our partner development managers and customer success group here at Vendasta to make sure that we're ready to answer questions as they come in from the field. So feel free to continue to reach out to our team. Gabrielle has asked a question, how much should we charge for a political campaign stack? Desiree, any comments on that? How much should we be charging for that campaign stack? Like what sort of margin can we add to the wholesale costs that you saw in your experience?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I will say this, in the political space, there's plenty of money. So don't be shy about asking for top dollar. And the reason why I say that is because you are going to be working hard and you're going to be working very quickly. Again, sometimes these campaigns have a very short window. So you're going to be creating urgency and putting that on whichever team is executing and fulfilling, whether it's us or an internal team, right? So don't hesitate to ask for full value of what you're providing. I would say the one thing that we really never had to do in the political space was discount. So the numbers that you use and you ask for are not going to shock a political candidate or a campaign manager.
Yeah, I just want to add some color to that. In the radio days, you had a local retail rate in your local market that you'd sell to the hardware store. And then you had a national card that you'd use for ad agencies. And political advertising always came off of that national rate, which was dramatically higher. So I don't think that you should, be shy to ask for good margin on your campaigns. My good friend Tanya Wren is on the call from Wren Interactive down in Louisiana. She asked, does the 3-month minimum apply to political ads? I want to revisit that with our teams because we're looking at a little bit different tactic here. We're not trying to build a campaign to drive foot traffic through the door of a business. We're driving awareness of the various political campaigns. So I believe that there should be a shorter window on those. Desiree, what's one of the shortest campaign windows that you saw for a political campaign?
Oh, 2 days.
Right.
2 days.
We're going to revisit that, Tanya. It's a good point. I'm glad that you brought this up. It's not something we're selling to a retail business that's looking for foot traffic. So, what we mean by that is you may want to sell them a 6-month stack of reputation management, social marketing, listings management, where they've got to buy it for a period of time so that it's worth your while to sell it. But when it comes to the ad campaigns, we want to sell, 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, 2 days worth, whatever is the budget and whatever they're trying to accomplish. So, we'll be working on that to come up with some of the best practices to show you that inside the resource center. Joseph asked, what about clients who are concerned about confidentiality? So I'd like to get a little bit more on that, Joseph. What I'm going to do is have Brock reach out to you directly so we can interrogate that question a little bit more and get you an answer about, your concern around confidentiality. And then Desiree, Bobby asks, can you talk about who and what to say to the decision maker of a campaign? Could you give us a bit of I know you love doing this, so I'm not putting you on the spot. Could you give us your elevator pitch?
Yeah, for me, I think it's really important to ask them, of course, who their main audience is. It's really important that you understand that before you start talking about tactics and approach. So if you take a step back and instead of starting with, hi, my name is Sally, and here's all the great products that I can offer you to drive this campaign forward, it's so important that you start with, I see so-and-so is running for candidacy, and I also see that you currently are the campaign manager. What I'd love to talk to you about is the audience that you're trying to reach, in addition to providing you some insights and data on some of the audiences that I've already collected. Right? Give them value first before you start talking about their money or about products and solutions. So if you tell them you have insights and data that you can provide them to help them, maybe even help them build that audience, you're going to see a much better response in terms of them engaging with you. And here's the thing, a lot of that information, as I mentioned before, is readily available online. So go online and start doing some research on millennials who have not decided how they're voting. Also, look for audiences that have decided that are currently registered voters, and make sure you're able to provide those insights if you're going to offer that up to a campaign manager or candidate. There's a plethora of information out there, and I don't know, maybe George, we can even share some links out as part of this webinar on that page that people can go to so that they can share that data with candidates and campaign managers.
Yeah, I know we definitely will be working on that. Joseph asked a great question here. Are there pre-built audiences of X party, people who have voted in the past X number of years? We're definitely working on those audiences right now. And as you folks go out and talk to candidates and talk to campaign managers, we'd love to get that feedback back to your partner development manager or agency growth manager around, they're looking for this audience. And then the ads team will go to work to be your liaison to get that audience put in place for you. So we do need to do a little bit of digging and find those insights. Donald's got a great question, Desiree. I'd like to get your feedback on this. Have you found issues working with just one party, or an issue of where you're working for the two competing political parties?
Definitely haven't run into any issues there. I think the reason being is both parties understand that media companies are going to work with both. And really in the political space, there is no exclusivity. So don't feel as though you have to provide exclusivity. It's a political race, therefore, it's open to everybody, and you don't want to limit yourself in terms of revenue. So if that does come up, I'm happy to hop on a call and strategize on how we can build talk tracks around that. But I haven't run into that, and I'm not sure if others have, but definitely something that I would say don't limit yourself to, and don't provide exclusivity.
Well, and I will tell you that this is just the beginning of a series of webinars and podcasts that we'll be bringing out over the next 6 months around this opportunity. It's a once every 2 years bonanza. This one's the big one, of course, the greatest show ever watched on TV, and it just gets more exciting every day with the crazy stuff that's going on. So there will be a lot of money spent. Jay asked the question, how do we address past successes or references in the political arena? Do we have an example of successful campaigns and case studies? We will be providing those, Jay, to you in the resource center so that you can use. And I also have a special announcement that on an upcoming edition of the Conquer Local podcast, we've secured Steve Passwaiter. Steve is a friend of mine and he's the VP and General Manager of Kantar Media. Kantar Media is a firm that does a ton of research in the political arena. A lot of the major broadcast companies use them to identify political opportunity in advertising. You know, there's an entire industry that's been built around this political opportunity. And we're going to get Steve here behind the mic and on a podcast the next couple of weeks. We'll be pre-promoting it to get some of his insights as to what the opportunity is in this space as we move closer to the 2020 election. Desiree, I really appreciate you joining us today, and thanks to all of our listeners on the webinar for their questions and for attending. We'll be taking this recording and posting it inside Partner Center. So if other members of your team, if you found it valuable and you'd like to share it, please do. Also, begging here for listenership around the Conquer Local podcast. Please feel free to jump forward and subscribe to that if you haven't already. We've got some great tactics in there for those of you that are conquering local. Brock Adney, our producer, did a great job putting together all of our materials. Thank you to Brock. And Desiree, thank you.
Thank you, George. Appreciate the time. Thanks, everyone.
My name is George Leith. I'll see you when I see you.